It's 109.5 WKNX with White
109.5
Knux.
WKNX, bringing you the hottest sports talk anytime, every time. I am Sean McCarty, and we are coming right off the heels of Week 5 of the NFL, and I live in that sweet state known as CT, and I just got through watching the majority of a New York Giants football team giving the New Orleans Saints their first victory, as well as catching some highlights of the New York Jets loss to the Dallas Cowboys, the Jets starting 0-5 this season, the only unwinning team, I believe, left in the NFL. And, it's just frustrating to me because I really want to support the Giants and the Jets because the New York Giants were my late father's football team, and I've always wanted them to succeed. I always hated when they actually did, even though I couldn't appreciate it for the moment as a Buccaneers fan first and foremost. But I always pay attention to the Giants, A, because I love talk radio, hence why I have chosen to make a station for myself. And so needless to say, I want the Giants to be a successful franchise. But here we are on October the 5th, 2025, into the 2025 season, with one combined win out of a possible 10 from the Giants and the Jets. And I can comfortably say that talk radio in New York City and talk radio in regards to the Giants and the Jets or whoever is going to be covering this no longer have to after this week. Week 5 proved to be the absolute death knell for both of these teams, and I'll get into it here in just a second. Because the sad thing is, I don't really believe that the Saints were a better team than the Giants. The Saints had a lot of things go their way. They also had a lot that didn't go their way. Hence the absolute nonsense roughing the passer call on Granderson, who had a great clean hit on Jackson Dart, and they called him for roughing the passer, which got the Giants into Saints territory. They were down by 2. I mean, the game was over anyway. They only had a minute to go down the field twice, and they couldn't even do it once, which was really genuinely not surprising given the way that they had played all day. The Giants had 2 great opening drives. They looked wonderful, and then the Saints figured them out. Because the problem is the Giants had one wide receiver. One. His name was Malik Neighbors. And the rest of the team surrounding Jackson Dart and this offense is bad. This offensive line, I mean, that Granderson coming across the corner for that hit that he was called on roughing the passer, there was no coverage at all. He was hardly touched by that tackle. What are you doing? It's unbelievable how little protection Jackson Dart had. He had to roll out even when the Saints defense wasn't even trying. They're the most disorganized team in the league other than the Jets, and I'll get to the Jets in a minute. The most penalized team in the league. They average 80 yards of penalty yards a game. They had 95 today. They made Spencer Rattler look like Tom Brady. The Giants, their defense is better than what they were showing on here, but they just lost their focus. And that's the problem. This team has no focus. And no matter what quarterback you've put in, no matter what seems the circumstances prevail, this team beats itself. And Darius Slayton is maybe the best guy you've got on that offense now as far as getting the ball. And none of this is to say Scatterboo, because Scatterboo is your star player right now. Jackson Dart's trying to figure some stuff out, but Cam Scatterboo has got a serious potential. He was grabbing a lot of those screen passes when Jackson Dart had to roll out, and a big toss was coming, and the Giants, right there, no matter what the pass was, Cam Scatterboo was great to catch those screens and go for 8 or 10 more yards. Kept a lot of drives going. But you get that, and then you get Darius Slayton dropping a layup of a pass in the middle of the second quarter. That would have given the Giants a much easier path to get in to field goal position with the Saints. Instead, that was their first punt of the game. They did not score again. This team is beating itself, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic here, but on year 4, Brian Daboll, I really got upset when the media focused on Brian Daboll hugging Jackson Dart like a proud father with his son, which, was a sweet moment. But you know what that thought gave to me? He looked at Jackson Dart and he thought, I might still have my job at the end of the year. It felt to me far more like he felt the job security more than he was actually proud. And I could be wrong about that. I'm not trying to put thoughts into the mind of Brian Daboll. But with what we know about this team and about this franchise and what they're really in, they're trying to just be competitive. But the general manager's got a lot to answer for. It's why the depth of this team and this wide receiving core is as bad as it is. Darius Slayton then with a terrible fumble that really was not as much a strip sack as much as it was Slayton not controlling his ball security. And they basically just take the ball out of his hands and immediately get into field goal range to where they were able to, the Saints that is, get the lead before the end of the half. And that was the end of the game. That was the end of the game for the New York Giants. This team beats itself every time, every game. And you can't succeed as a franchise like that. And ultimately, that comes down to preparedness, and that preparedness is on the shoulders of the head coach. And I know a lot of people like Brian Daboll, but I cannot be the only one, even though I'm not even like the sole dedicated, emotionally invested fan of this team, because I'm more of a Buccaneers fan than anything else. But at the same point, as someone who wants this team to succeed, I can't be the only one who's frustrated here. It is frustrating to watch this team play. Easy catches are dropped. Easy ball security, just focus problems, cost you turnovers. Giants had 5 turnovers in this game. 5 turnovers in this game. They made the Saints look downright competitive in the NFC South, which has got better teams in it than a lot of the league wants to admit. And the Saints shouldn't have been able, on their home turf, they should have been uncomfortable playing the Giants, and it looked like they were smooth sailing. They were angrier at the officiating than they were at the Giants. And now the Giants are 1-4. Same as the Saints. And the Saints are not going anywhere this year. You know, Kellen Moore's just trying to instill a culture. And that's why I'm giving the Jets a little bit more of a pass here, but we'll talk about them in a second. Ultimately, the Saints could have easily lost this game. Probably should have. But the Giants never lose to the team that they're playing against. The Giants lose their own battles. And it's not year one for Brian Daboll. It's not year one for Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen let Daniel Jones go, and Daniel Jones put up 40 against the Raiders earlier today. He let Saquon Barkley go, and Saquon won a Super Bowl. Basically everything that you could have done to screw this team over of its stars, you have done. And everybody shat on Gettleman. But Gettleman seemed to have at least a little foresight into his drafting. Joe Schoen came in from a Buffalo team that was almost fully built when he came along and added some final pieces to make them highly competitive. Look where Buffalo is now. Look where New York is now. And I hate to say this, but it's going to come to an end. And I'm not expecting John Mara to pull the plug in the middle of the season. I'm not. I'm genuinely not expecting that. Because I don't think John Mara has the temperament for it. You know, and I think he also knows that realistically it wouldn't do any good. You know, because this team's not going to play for a backup of somebody who's already on this squad, right? If let's say they promote the offensive coordinator, the defense coordinator, do you think the team's going to play more for them than they do Daboll? I don't think so. I think you got to keep Daboll in for the rest of the year. You know, good or bad, if this team ends up picking first or second in the draft, so be it. But at least then you know what you've dealt with. And you know that the turnaround has to be necessary. And I do think it is going to be necessary. No matter what the record is for the Giants this year. And think of this, if the Giants had won this game, all of a sudden they're 2-3, going into some very difficult games against the Broncos, who beat the Eagles, and the Eagles twice in the next 5 weeks. And now the Giants don't look like they have a prayer of beating any of those teams. I'm not saying that they did before this game, but this was one of the layup games. This was one of the easy ones. And you can't get the easy ones. And that's the problem with the Giants. Games that they should clearly be winning, they find ways to lose. And that's the sign of a failing culture when this coach is in year 4. But you do have highlights. This defense didn't play terribly. It had its weaknesses, but it didn't play terribly. There's more upside to the defense than there is the offense. The offense needs depth. Losing Malik Neighbors killed your offense. And it wasn't doing that great to begin with. And none of this is on Dart. Dart's doing the best that he can. But he's a rookie. What else are you going to expect out of him? I don't know, man. This Giants team, it's treading water at best, but they've got anvils on each leg. They're treading water with anvils on each leg. And at some point, you either got to cut the anvils or you're going to drown. And it kind of feels like both are going to happen concurrently with the New York Football Giants. And I think that's really just tragic. Then we get to the Jets. And here's my issue. I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned that Woody Johnson, because he is maybe the most inept owner in sports, and yes, that includes Jerry Jones. It seems to me like Woody Johnson went out and did what he always does, which is hire the wrong guy to change the culture of the Jets. We've heard a lot of talk. We've heard a lot of talk from Aaron Glenn. A lot of it. And yet, what results has it gotten? We're not the same old Jets. You sure playing like it. The score was 30-6 before the fourth quarter. This team was gone. This team was done. Don't look at the 22 score and be like, oh, at least they were someone in it. No, they weren't. They scored 16 points in garbage time. They got a safety that meant nothing. And at this point, with 0-5, their season is completely done. And you know their season's completely done. And I'm not saying it wasn't before, but you need to have something to hang your hat on to give you hope that this team is going somewhere. And this team is doing terribly. Terribly. It's painful to watch this Jets team. And the sad part is Justin Fields is really not the problem. 283 yards and 2 touchdowns, even though it was in garbage time. He didn't throw a single pick. But this team just couldn't get anything going. Breece Hall got 113 yards. It's you look at the stats and it doesn't tell the story. Breece Hall lost a fumble. That was rough. But this defense got completely carved up. And, I've been trying my best to try and be supportive of Sauce Gardner. This kid is not it. This kid had highlights of one good season, and ever since, he has played bad football. Unfocused, undisciplined football. And the Jets are in the same spot. They let Dak Prescott look like Dak Prescott did when he debuted 8 or 9 years ago. 4 touchdowns for Dak. He was only 18 for 29. But 4 touchdowns for Dak. Let alone all the penalty yards. This team of the Jets looked like it was not ready to play. It looked like they didn't look at any film. And the Dallas Cowboys, whose defense is absolutely garbage this year, the Jets couldn't find a way to score for 3 quarters. How do you do this? And it's not like the quarterback play is bad. It's that this team is overwhelmed because I truly believe Aaron Glenn is overwhelmed. And Steve Wilkes, you got to let that. I think you got to let him go. I think you need to let the defensive coordinator go. I know it's early. I know it is. But I would be more trustworthy of Aaron Glenn taking over the defensive play calling because at least we know Aaron Glenn does know what he's talking about when it comes to defense. Steve Wilkes has killed this team's chances. They're 0-5. Aaron Glenn is going to make a ton of excuses in the postgame press conference because he said it's not the same old Jets, but you look at every time you go out there and it gets worse week by week. And Dallas is 2-2, and right now in that division, that's not doing too bad. I mean, the Eagles are 4-1. Yeah, they lost today, but they're in firm control of that. The Giants are a non-issue, as we've already discussed. And the Commanders, who knows what end is up when it comes to the Washington Commanders. They're battling a lot of injuries, but they're playing a shell-shocked Chargers team, which right now, at the time I'm recording this, is still in the middle of the first, and there's no score. But the Chargers are at the Washington 11. But Washington doesn't look like the team that they were last year. It looks like the year after Dan Quinn's successful year. We saw this with the Falcons when Dan Quinn did this with Atlanta. Made it to the Super Bowl. This happened, and then the unthinkable happened. But the problem is, you can't even say that what's happening with the Jets is unthinkable because it is so textbook. It is textbook New York Jets. And I truly believe, and I hate to say that people like Beningo are right, where they say it does not matter who you bring in as coach, it does not matter who you bring in as general manager. This team is dead on arrival. It's a jet that can never leave the fucking hangar. It's stuck at the airport. And will perhaps always be stuck at the airport. And that's the thing. This team, I don't think, can possibly progress until Woody Johnson sells the team. Woody Johnson has to give up this team. We are at the point where the Mets were with the Wilpons and arguably still are even with the ownership change, considering the collapse of biblical proportions that we saw out of the New York Mets. But the Jets are sitting there looking at the Mets going, hold my freaking beer, because they can't do a damn thing. And at what point do you look at this franchise and go, this isn't worth it? You can't tell me that Jets fans are still going to games. Because every year they've got the longest current playoff drought, at 15 years. And as a Buccaneers fan, I know what that's like. I know the agony of that. Seeing how the team prior to the Jets having the longest streak, that had the longest streak, was in fact the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 13. So I get it, and I feel it, and I understand it. On a deep ethereal level, the rage, the frustration, and the overall just, you can't invest emotion into this team. Because if you do, you're just going to get heartbroken time after time after time after time after time with no solace and no respite. The last time I was excited for the New York Jets was Mike freaking White. Think about the ground that covers. That was the last time I was excited about the Jets, and that lasted a hot cup of coffee. And I wanted to believe. I go into every Jets season, and the reason I'm invested in the Jets is not just because of here. I'm also invested in the Jets because in Pee Wee football in Walton, New York, as a child, my very first team that I ever played for was the Pee Wee League of the New York Jets. And guess what? We went winless! We were 0-5-1 because we tied the Giants. So even in Pee Wee League, the Jets can't do shit. And you have to ask yourself, what is the reason why you are in this position? And right now, it is ownership and ownership alone. Woody's having his kids not make moves because his kids are telling him don't make moves because of Madden ratings. And we expected him to hire the right coach. And Aaron Glenn, half the time he looks like a deer in headlights, trying to hold on to a situation that he has no control over. And I don't want him to go the Gerard Mayo route where they just don't get anywhere this year. And then they put it on him. They need time to build this team. They've got no defense. They need a defense. They need time to figure all that out. And I'm not suggesting that you get rid of either the general manager or the coach after 1 year. It's 5 games in. Half the reason we're in the shape we're in right now is because of how trigger happy Woody Johnson was with Bob Saleh. And I'm not saying you needed to keep Robert Saleh. He was a bad head coach. He was bad for the Jets. It was a bad pairing. And they gave him way too much time. And they shot everything at the wall in those seasons with Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers. And in typical Jets fashion, he's down in 4 plays. Rodgers, that is. And Robert Saleh had nothing to go on. And just because Rodgers was there, Saleh got a 4th year. And we all know what happened. And we thought that maybe Aaron Glenn, with a little sense of discipline and having been a Jet in previous, in his football playing career, he might have an edge. But he looks the same. He looks the same. And I don't know what to tell the city of New York. Because right now it is October 5th, 2025. And I can say with firm confidence, you don't need to watch another game. You don't. Either team. You don't need to watch another game, much less spend the money to go to a ticket and actually buy it and go to one of these games. Why waste an afternoon? Because there's no reason to go and watch this game. There's no reason to watch these teams right now. Aaron Glenn is in growing pains right now, and they're going to figure it out. But I'll tell you something. With the Jets schedule, I don't expect this losing streak to stop. I think it's possible we go 7, 8, 9, 10 games before the Jets sneak one after it's relevant. And I think right now the time of relevancy has come and gone for New York. As a whole. The Knicks are starting up. They've been looking good. Even though they fired their coach that they really needed. And now they're playing with somebody else. And we'll see how that goes. The Rangers are starting up. They had kind of a middling season. But, the Bruins are tanking and tanking fast. That gives the Rangers an opening. Same with the Islanders. Even though they're in a different, they're in the other conference. But, there's a lot of New York sports. Yankees playoffs happening right now. In the game against Toronto, which I know has started. I'm not sure what the score is, but you got playoff baseball. And I think right now that's all you can bank on. Because it is a cesspool in MetLife Stadium. And it truly is a tragedy. We'll see you later.